An ambitious Viking chieftain suddenly appeared in Ireland in 837, bending vast swathes of Ireland under his rule. But his conquests were short-lived, as he was killed by the Irish, and is yet remembered by a small island on an Irish lake.
He was known as Thorgest and Turgesius, and this is his tale.
The Annals of Ulster announced the arrival of Turgesius at the head of a Viking fleet. The Chronicum Scortorium states his armada consisted of 120 longships which sailed along the River Boyne and Liffey, and stated the warriors under his command, quote, plundered the churches, forts and dwellings in the northern modern counties of Dublin, Louth and Kildare. Gerald of Wales, writing in 1188, tells us, quote, the Norwegians put in at the Irish shores with a great fleet. They both took the country in a strong grip and, maddened in their hatred, destroyed nearly all the churches. Their leader, who was called Turgesius, quickly subjected the whole island to himself in many varied conflicts and fierce wars. Scholars theorised Turgesius raided Ireland in the early 820s and got to know the terrain well enough to mount an invasion of the island. Irish chroniclers claimed that Turgesius planned to transform Ireland into a Norse colony, similar to the Danelaw in Anglo-Saxon England that occurred 30 years later.
The Danelaw was a part of England taken by a Viking invasion in 865.
His arrival signalled a more permanent settlement of the Northmen in Ireland. Before this, Viking activity consisted of small hit-and-run raids. Turgesius, quote, assumed the sovereignty of the foreigners of Ireland and made Armagh the capital of his kingdom. As well as at sea, he deployed his fleets on the inland rivers and lakes. The Annals of Ulster recounted that the Vikings at Lough Neagh did not return to Scandinavia in 841. They instead overwintered at their Longport. These Longports were in many ways fortified naval bases. The Vikings used the Longports to moor their ships and raid monasteries further inland. It is possible he used Longports at Dublin on the River Liffey, and as per my previous video, Lindochil along the River Glyde in County Louth. The Annals of Ulster recounted the Vikings at Lindochil and Dublin raided the great monasteries of Clonmacnoise and Armagh in 842. The Irish chroniclers noted the Vikings acted savagely towards captive abbots and monks.
In fact, the information plaque at Lindochil states that, quote, the abbot was roasted on a gridiron.
Turgesius was also called by the name Thorgest, meaning servant of Thor.
Thor is a prominent god in Norse mythology. One 11th century Christian chronicler records that, quote, Thor, they reckon, rules the sky. He governs thunder and lightning, winds and storms, fine weather and fertility. While another opinion is quite direct, quote, Thor faces his problems with a hammer in his hand and violence in his heart.
It was said Turgesius drove out Foranan, the abbot of Armagh, and made the great monastery his capital and established a pagan temple dedicated to Thor. Another annal recounted Ota, the wife of Turgesius, was a pagan priestess, the 12th century Cugga Gael Rigalab, which says, quote, Turgesius is a despot who overawed most of Ireland, gaining control of Armagh and of Clonmacnoise, where his supposed wife Ota gave pagan oracles from the altar. This led some scholars to believe that Turgesius intended to usurp Christianity in Ireland and planned to force the Irish population to worship the pagan gods of Scandinavia.
The downfall of Turgesius came when Mael Sheachlan, king of Meath, ambushed and captured him in 845. There are a few versions of what happened next.
One account says he drowned the Norse chieftain by rolling him down a hill in a barrel into the waters of Lough Owel in County Westmeath. Another claimed he was drowned in nearby Lough Ennell.
However, the most elaborate story comes from Gerald of Wales, who, writing in 1188, states,
Turgesius happened to be at the time very much enamoured by the daughter of Mael Sheachlan, the king of Meath. The king hid his hatred in his heart, and granting the girl to Turgesius, promised to send her to him with 15 beautiful maidens to a certain island in Meath, in the lake of Loch Ver. Turgesius was delighted and went to the rendezvous on the appointed day with 15 nobles of his people. They encountered on the island, decked out in girls' clothes, to practice their deceit, 15 young men, shaven of their beards and full of courage. They carried knives hidden in their persons, and with these they killed Turgesius and his companions in the mists of their embraces.
Loch Lane is a lake in County Westmeath. Within it there are 3 islands, Nuns Island and Castle Island. Both have an archaeological record.
But there is a third one that locals say once held a fort. It is Turgesius Island, named after the great warlord himself. But this has no archaeological record.
It begs the question of what Viking secrets it might hold.
Loch shields! Step back! Step back! Gang of friend!